In the middle of chaos, when even leaders seemed vulnerable, a single mechanic stepped forward. Few people know this shocking fact. Ibrahim Traoré's life was once saved by a mechanic. After that shocking moment where a mechanic's courage saved Traoré, one question naturally arises. Why was the young soldier so vulnerable in the first place? The answer lies in the turbulence of Burkina Faso during his rise. The nation was facing waves of political instability, repeated coups, and external pressures. In such an environment, even those who dreamed of change found themselves surrounded by dangers, not only from enemies outside, but also from mistrust within. Traoré, a soldier with vision beyond the battlefield, carried the weight of expectations at a very young age. The military ranks were divided, foreign influence was shaping decisions, and ordinary people were desperate for leadership that actually belonged to them. But a man in this position, no matter how determined, was far from safe. His vulnerability was not weakness, it was a reflection of the fractured system he inherited. Every coup before him had left scars. Every betrayal had weakened the trust among allies. In that fragile moment, when forces of corruption and sabotage were at their peak, even a simple journey could turn fatal, and it was exactly in one of those fragile moments that destiny intervened. Not through politicians, not through generals, but through a mechanic with grease on his hands and determination in his heart. What happened next would not only save a man's life, but also plant a seed of belief in Traoré himself, that the strength of a nation often rests in the ordinary hands of its people. And nowhere was this truth more visible than in the dusty airstrip where Traoré found himself stranded. His plane meant to carry him through a critical mission had suddenly failed. The engine sputtered, metal groaned, and for a brief, terrifying moment, it seemed as if destiny itself had turned against him. Soldiers around him whispered in panic, some suspecting sabotage, others fearing what would happen if the mission was abandoned. Tension grew heavier with every second. Traoré, calm yet visibly burdened, knew that a single failure could cost not only his life, but also the fragile trust of a people waiting for hope. And then, from the shadows of uncertainty, stepped a man whose name history may never fully record, a mechanic. His clothes were stained with oil, his hands rough from years of work, yet his eyes carried quiet determination. Without ceremony, he crouched beneath the plane, listening to the stubborn coughs of the engine as if it were speaking directly to him. Minutes felt like hours. Sparks flew, tools clattered, and sweat dripped, but the mechanic did not waver. He knew the risk. If the engine failed mid-air, Traoré's fate was sealed. But with steady hands and an unshakable will, he coaxed the machine back to life. The roar of the engine broke the silence like thunder. Relief spread across the soldiers. Traoré looked at the mechanic, realizing in that moment that sometimes history is turned not by generals, but by a single man with a wrench. That image never left Traoré's mind. As the engine roared back to life, it wasn't just the sound of a repaired machine, it was the heartbeat of resilience. The reminder that even in the darkest hours, strength could come from the most unexpected places. When the plane lifted off the runway, Traoré sat quietly in his seat, the noise of the engine steady now, almost reassuring. But inside, his thoughts were louder than the roar of the propellers. He realized that leadership was not about commanding from above, but about recognizing the silent sacrifices of those below, the farmers, the workers, and the mechanics who held the nation together. This was no ordinary repair. It was a lesson. If a mechanic could save a leader at the brink of failure, then what could an entire nation of determined, ordinary Africans achieve when united? For Traoré, this moment crystallized his belief that dignity and independence were built not by foreign powers, but by the sweat and courage of his own people. The rescue was not just mechanical, it was symbolic. It showed that survival and even victory often depended on trust in the hands of ordinary citizens. And from that day, Traoré carried with him an unshakable conviction: the fate of Africa must never again depend on outsiders, but on the strength and unity of its own sons and daughters. As the flight continued, Traore kept replaying the moment in his mind, the grease-stained hands, the determined eyes of the mechanic, and the quiet confidence with which he worked. To the outside world, it may have seemed like nothing more than a simple repair. But to Traore, it was a revelation. That mechanic was not just a man fixing an engine. He was a symbol of Africa itself, worn, tested, yet unbroken. Every twist of the wrench told a story. It was the story of farmers tilling dry soil under a burning sun, of miners carving out a living from the earth, and of young people struggling to build a future despite poverty and doubt. Just like that mechanic, ordinary Africans had been carrying the weight of broken systems and failed promises for decades, yet they continued to stand, to work, to believe. The symbolism was powerful. If one man's skill could save a leader, then the collective strength of millions could save a continent. Traore saw in that act the embodiment of self-reliance, a core African value that colonial powers had long tried to erase. The mechanic proved that true power does not always come from foreign aid or from towering institutions. It comes from within, from the resilience of ordinary people. For Traore, this was no longer just a personal rescue. It was a metaphor for Africa's path, survival through unity, progress through its own hands, and freedom carved out by the strength of its own people. As the plane touched the runway safely, a silence filled the cabin, one that spoke louder than cheers. Traore closed his eyes not in relief, but in realization. He understood that destiny had spared him for a reason. A mechanic, a man unknown to history books, had saved not only his life, but also the vision he carried for Africa. That moment reshaped his mission. Leaders might rise and fall, but the true guardians of history are the ordinary. Farmers, workers, mechanics, those who rarely receive recognition, yet hold the continent on their shoulders. Without them, no revolution could survive, and no freedom could last. Traore vowed never to forget this truth. His survival was not his own achievement. It was gifted by the skill and courage of one man representing millions. And so, he carried a message to his people and to the world. Africa's strength lies not in foreign powers, but in the everyday resilience of its sons and daughters. History, he thought, is not written by those who are saved. It is written by those who save.